If it goes right, it's a slice. If it goes left, it's a hook. If it goes straight, it's a miracle. This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
All right, welcome back to the Out of Bounds podcast. Josh Durso and Nate Sharman here talking about the Wyndham Championship, which turned out to be a pretty compelling tournament, all things considered. Maybe not what we thought it was going to be coming down the stretch on Saturday with a couple 40-somethings battling, but still very exciting nonetheless. Entering Sunday, Nate, it was really interesting because it's like a blast from the past. Billy Horschel and Lucas Glover battling.
Right. And then you have Russell Henley in the picture too, right? And another a veteran on tour. And then it takes a rain delay, right? Where we're delayed for a good amount of time. And we're all talking about how this could come into a real wedge contest, right? There's going to be some really low scores with these really soft conditions. And that didn't really happen. Russell Henley kind of limps in, goes bogey, bogey, bogey to finish. And Lucas Glover ends up getting the victory on tour. So big for him. He gets in the FedEx Cup playoffs with that win, needed a win or a second place finish in order to get in that side of that top 70. So hats off. Lucas Glover gets the victory, heads into the FedEx Cup playoffs. And
the opposite side of that coin is Billy Horschel, who basically had the same conditions, needed a win or a solo second, did not get either. Wound up finishing the day with a birdie. Ironically enough, his 72nd hole was his only birdie of the entire day. So there's that. And, 91st, I believe he finished 91st or 92nd in the FedEx Cup points. So
what a weird kind of year for Billy Horschel, right? I mean, he kind of played well in the beginning of the year, and then he gets to the Memorial and he shoots that 82, I think it was, it might have been an 84, it might have even been higher. And then he gets to the press after and you see him crying and talking about the physical toll that golf's put on his body and the mental toll as well, too, with things going on back home. So, and then he comes to the end of the year, he's been playing a little bit better, and then he's in contention on Sunday at the Wyndham, right? Almost makes the playoffs. So hats off to Billy Horschel too for, kind of getting through a lot of things that were going on in his life and really being there towards the end and having a shot to get into the FedEx Cup playoffs.
Yeah. And how about the bad luck obviously 3 straight bogeys. That's not a winning combination, right? But Russell Henley had some bad luck coming down the stretch. So he hits a shot, catches the front of the green, rolls back, ends up in, they called it a divot, but I don't think it was a divot because it looked like an actual hole. Like the golf ball comes to rest clearly beneath the surface. Prompted a bit of a debate on social afterward about, the rule needing to be different for these types of situations, whether or not a guy should, you could argue, lose a golf tournament because his golf ball wound up coming to rest in a divot. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think it seems like something like this comes up every 3 or 4 weeks.
This happened not too long ago, right? We were so hung up on the Open Championship and Brian Harman's dominance. But over on the opposite field event that week at the Barracuda, Patrick Rogers was in a playoff against Akshay Bhatia, and Patrick Rogers striped one in a playoff right down the middle, and he's in a divot. And, this is a playoff to try to win, an event on tour, and it's just unfortunate Akshay ends up coming up with a victory. And it's just really boggles my mind, Josh, that we haven't been able to find a way where, we play lift, clean, in place a lot of times on the PGA Tour when there's bad weather, right? Why aren't we playing lift, clean, in place, when you're in a divot like that, when you're in a protrusion that affects the golf swing, right? I don't know what, maybe that's, we'd have to really figure out a way so guys aren't getting around it and finding out how we can move our ball in our own fairway, because I don't think the fix is to just let guys move in their own fairway. I think that gets a little tricky, right, Josh? But after we're playing, 144 guys and playing 4 days at the same golf course, these guys are hitting in the similar areas, right? You're especially on these holes where they're playing to targets, right? You look at the fairway and it's just ripped up with divots. So that's something that we definitely have to talk about too and figure out a way. Josh, do you have a fix in your mind that you think we can get around this problem?
Yeah, I think just on sort of like if the tour or the tournament organizers and rules officials, I suppose, were to a couple times a day go out and effectively mark off areas where there's clearly a lot of traffic, clearly a lot of ball marks that aren't fixed, divots that aren't fixed, that kind of situation could potentially help. I don't know if it would fix it, right? Like I don't.
Yeah,
think
that's a good idea. Maybe just mark off some spray paint, right? Almost, and kind of effectively have a spot where guys are dropping the ball, not necessarily placing it, but they're dropping it in a more clean area, and give them a couple tries in case it rolls into another divot. But that's actually a really good idea, Josh, and one I hadn't thought of. I really like that idea.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily know that it would even need to be that complicated. Like if you're in the designated area, the designated landing zone that's, received a lot of torture over the course of a couple days of play, then you just effectively get to place. And,
Right.
In theory, everybody should be getting have the same look because you hit the fairway and you're in the fairway. And we all know tour fairways are pretty darn good if you're not in a divot. So all things should be pretty fair and equal there.
Right. Or you could just be Rory McIlroy and hit it like 40 yards past everybody and be fine in the fairway.
That also helps. So speaking of people who needed a big weekend this past weekend, Justin Thomas needed a huge one and came up just short. I posted a TikTok about this last night, just short. He actually played his tail off coming down the stretch, but finishes 71st. He has that pitch shot that almost goes in. I think it was a little hot. I don't think it necessarily really had a serious chance of going in. I think just the drama of the whole thing. He's on his 72nd hole. He basically needs to hole out to get into the FedEx Cup playoffs, and just the visual of seeing the golf ball bounce off the flagstick and then ricochet back and not go in. Did you end up seeing that? I know you didn't see it live, but
yeah.
Did you end up seeing that afterward?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty admirable, right? It's almost like you're playing match play, right? And we had a tournament over the weekend where we did that, and your partners or your group against you's in for a birdie or whatever, and you got to try to hold the shot, right? Whether it be a chip shot or a long putt too, right? And you knock it out on a putt too, and a scramble even, you knock it 10, 12 feet by, and you tell yourself, well, that's okay because I gave it a chance. And that's exactly what Justin Thomas did. He didn't leave it 10 feet short. It might have been hot, like you said, Josh, but he gave it a chance, and that's all you can do in that situation. So really good job by Justin Thomas, knowing that he needed a good week. Didn't know exactly, what he needed. It was looking like he would need a top 20, and I kind of thought that it would be enough for what he had, looking from an outsider's perspective, but it ended up not being enough just with the shuffling that kind of happened towards the end of that round. But really good play by Justin Thomas to try to get into the FedEx Cup playoffs. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, and right there knocking on the door. So let's talk a little bit about our bets. Good, bad, and ugly. Wasn't as bad as last week for me personally. JT Poston, top 10 finish. Cam Davis, top 20 finish. Those were the only two for me out of my 6 picks. Obviously, I had Justin Thomas to win. I felt like that was a long shot coming in. I was just kind of riding off of the potential momentum that I thought he might be carrying into the week because of the make or breakness of the whole weekend for him. What you had a good week.
Yeah, I did a lot better week, Josh, and collectively we did a lot better than our 0 for 6 or 0 for a million, whatever it was last week. So good for that. But yeah, top 20, I had just like you said, your man Justin Thomas. I didn't quite think he was going to win the golf event, but he was in the top 20, so I took that one at plus 200. Eric Cole, he was in the top 10, I think, starting on Sunday. Didn't play too well on Sunday, but that was still inside the top 40, so it's okay. And I had my prop of the week too. I had Shane Lowry and Ludwig Aberg to make the cut. Both made the cut very easily. I think Shane Lowry was a couple in, and so was Ludwig Aberg. So nice to have those 3 picks, come through for me, because last week was obviously a rough week for us. The only pick I had wrong was Sam Burns to come in the winner's circle. That was about 28 or 30 to 1. He played okay. Didn't really have any time to have a contention, but still pretty good for me. If I'm going to lose one bet and it's my winner pick, that's the one I probably put the least amount of money on this week. So I'll take that. A really huge successful week for myself.
That's awesome. And FanDuel and the PGA Tour announcing this morning that we've got expanded live golf markets. You got to be pretty stoked about this.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. FanDuel announced it this morning, right? Like you said, you're going to be able to track players during the playoffs and bet with new live markets with events like close to the pin, longest drive, and more. Josh, this is really cool. because you're able to, look at a group that Rory McIlroy and Rahm are playing together, right? So they both have a 120-yard shot, and you're able to play close to the pin. And it's real-time betting, right? It's something that the golf viewer can be sitting on their couch watching in a state that is, legal for FanDuel to be operating in, and being able to say, oh, that ball's closer than that one. And so it's just going to be a lot of fun, I think. As we go into the tournament this week and throughout the playoffs, I'll be able to kind of mess around a little bit with it on FanDuel, and I'll give my reviews here. But I think it's a really great idea that FanDuel is jumping into that kind of live golf market aspect. Agreed.
Every other sport has it, right? Like you can bet on at bats in the MLB. You can bet on possessions in football.
Ball or strike. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I mean, so it makes complete sense. And it'll be interesting. It's kind of surprising that they're just rolling it out now. Like, I feel like this is something that's probably been in the works for a while. I don't know what logistically was involved, but I'm glad it's here now.
The problem with golf betting, I think, is why things have taken a little bit longer, is just because you have so much more fan element, things. You could say yell in somebody's backswing or take a picture or something of that nature. So I think there's a couple more hurdles that they had to jump through with the fans being a lot closer than they are in, say, football or baseball. It's harder to kind of influence the game. So that's something they've had to jump through a little bit, but I think they have it down here, and hats off for FanDuel for figuring this out and trying this live golf market. I can't wait to dive in.
Yeah, and it'll also be very interesting to see how quickly the other platforms pick it up, like DraftKings.
Well, I think FanDuel is the official betting partner, so I think they get sort of, first on the ball to it, I believe.
That's very interesting. Be interesting if they were actually blocked, if the others were actually blocked out, moving forward from being able to get into that, because I think that could become a pretty big driver for engagement during golf. I know on
DraftKings you can bet for a guy to make a birdie or to make a par, right? You can do that. Yeah. So it's not the same aspects as what we're having here on FanDuel with games like close to the pin or longest drive. So yeah, it'll be fun to look into that, Josh.
All right, so let's talk about the season. The regular season is officially in the books. Biggest winner, biggest loser. We kind of were batting this around before we came on. To me, a couple people really stood out, and I'll go first, give you some more time to think about this. My biggest winner of the regular season is Ricky Fowler, right? For obvious reasons. Coming from where he was kind of on the cusp of, starting to fade into a place where maybe he wasn't going to come back at all. His game completely turns around. He's literally morphed himself into one of the 20 best golfers in the world, basically. And here he is now entering the FedEx Cup playoffs with a legit chance to, if he plays well the next couple weeks, to really be in it at the championship here. So he's, for me, the biggest winner. Biggest loser is Kevin Kisner. Started the season inside the top 50 in world golf ranking, now sits 101st, 202nd in FedEx Cup points. This is a guy who, coming into the season, he was able to participate in all of the elevated events, which for a million reasons was thought to be this really beneficial thing to have this season, because moving forward, there are going to be stipulations, right, on who actually gets into those events. You had a lot of guys like Kisner who maybe weren't technically among the 50 best golfers, but because of position at the end of last year, just were more or less grandfathered in. And you wonder if a guy like Kisner can get it back and get back to a point where he can compete at that top level again. I really wonder, especially given his age. He's a little bit older. But for those reasons, that's literally why I think he is the biggest loser of the 2023 season.
Yeah, I think he'll be able to figure it out. In typical Kevin Kisner fashion, he tweeted about, something completely different from golf. And someone asked when he's going to play again, because, he didn't play a lot in the back half of the season. And he responded with, when I can break par at my local course. So, he's obviously in a bad place, whether that be mentally, so that's so much with golf or even physically too. But Kevin Kisner's a lot of fun to watch on the tour, especially with what he's done with some of the foreplay guys and stuff like that, with the ain't no hobby, kind of mindset too, really easy to kind of resonate with a guy like Kevin Kisner. So I hope for that sake, he can come back and play well. And I wouldn't put it past him.
Who do you have as far as biggest winner, biggest loser? Who do you think?
So my two that I've picked here are a little bit more recency bias, and actually a couple guys that we've already talked about. So I'll do it pretty quick here. Lucas Glover's got to be my biggest winner of the week. If he's obviously the winner of the week, right? Won the Wyndham Championship, needed a win or, like I said, a second place finish to get in, and does just that. Faced off, with Billy Horschel and Russell Henley and some other names too to get into the FedEx Cup playoffs. Loser is JT. I mean, all season he's really not played very well. Josh, you did a deep dive into the kind of the numbers of what Justin Thomas's game is, and it's not like he's hitting his driver bad or his wedge bad. He's hitting everything kind of more so bad, right? For the whole duration of the season, played a little better here towards the end and played well, especially in the Wyndham almost got in the playoffs like we talked about. It's going to be really interesting to see if Zach Johnson selects him for the Ryder Cup team. We could talk about that a little bit more, coming up here. But it definitely is a loser for JT to have to sit out the fall portion of the playoffs on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, let's get right into that question. Honestly, I think it's the biggest one. And obviously for reasons you mentioned and the dive that I did a couple weeks ago on TikTok, yes, statistically speaking, Justin Thomas is in about as dark a place as you could possibly be. Now, we saw this past weekend what looked more like normal Justin Thomas. Justin Thomas did what he did this past weekend all year. Even if he hadn't won anything, we would be saying, yeah, it was a fine year. No big deal. Like, he probably would have had a few top fives. He probably would have had a few top 10s, top 25s.
Yeah, he had a Patrick Cantlay year.
Right. Exactly. So, should he be on the Ryder Cup team? Is he going to be on the Ryder Cup team? Those are the two most central questions to American golf right now. And I'm sticking to my guns. I know he looked good this past weekend and he looked better. But it's on body of work. You can't let that recency bias be that influential if you're captain Zach Johnson. I don't care what impact he's had on American golf over the last 10 years or how much of an impact he's been morally on the team from a morale standpoint. All of that's great, but the reason why he's been such an influential player on the U.S. men's Ryder Cup team over the last, I don't know, like four-ish cycles is because of how good he is and how good he plays. He's not doing that. So I don't know. I don't know why you would pick him. I don't know how you could pick him given what we've seen. That's nothing against him. It's just sort of a statement of where his game has been for the last 3 months and where I think you have to believe it still is.
Right. And if you do take Justin Thomas, which I'm starting to lean that he probably will, I don't think he should, but I'm starting to think that, Zach Johnson's going to take Justin Thomas on the team, in a couple weeks here in Italy. But if you do take him, like I said, you got to leave out Cameron Young or Tony Finau. And that is a really, really, really hard, decision for Zach Johnson. And if he does do that, I'm really interested to see, when somebody asks him first time, what played into the decision-making role to take whoever you took on the team. I'm really interested to hear those questions from Captain Zach Johnson.
Yeah, it's a tough pick, but again, I just go back to, who's won, who's not. And that's kind of where it starts and stops for me.
Finau won.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the FedEx Cup field. Favorites, expectations, thoughts, anything else in that arena as we enter the first week here. Obviously, we won't have any defending champ at this week's event. But Stack's Field going to be incredible. Going to be a ton of fun to watch. I'm curious to see if Jon Rahm can sort of recapture the energy that he had in like the middle third-ish of the year when he was just rattling off wins and just playing as dominantly as I think we've seen anybody play while winning, not withholding Scottie Scheffler's sustained greatness over this entire year. But I'm curious to see if he can kind of reignite that because it seems like it's been a little lost over the last couple of months. He doesn't look like the same golfer that he did in the beginning of the year. Yeah,
no, that's a good point too. And to that point, I kind of want to see what Scottie Scheffler does. We saw him in that first position last year. He looked like he was going to win the Tour Championship, right? And then, shoots that 3 over par round 73 at East Lake, and Rory comes out with the victory for last year's Tour Championship. I'm interested to see what Scottie kind of fuels in his bones, right? To try to kind of come back from that and see if he can take down the Tour Championship. That's not something he's done yet. So I'm be really interested to see him, and I'm not going to count it against him. He's played some unbelievable golf, and just barely made the cut, at the Open Championship to get through. But I think Scotty will win this Tour Championship, and I think he continues to play well this season.
Yeah, and playoffs. You know what? Another note on Scheffler there. When you think back to that final round last year with Rory, when the two of them are sort of going back and forth, his putting really let him down. And again, this year, it's the one statistical area that's basically been an anomaly for him. Everything else has been through the roof. So can he get the putter figured out? If he does, man, he could definitely make a run. Nate, walk us through some of the other results that we had over this weekend in professional golf.
Over on the LPGA Tour, Celine Boutier wins back-to-back weeks on the LPGA Tour. She takes down the Scottish Open there. Pretty cool for Celine to win again on the LPGA Tour. Won a major the week before and then wins the Scottish the week after. Pretty cool stuff. Over on the Korn Ferry Tour, former PGA Tour player Roger Sloan, if you're a PGA Tour sicko like me, you know that name, wins at the Utah Championship at Oak Ridge Country Club. And more than just Roger Sloan's playoff victory, on that Korn Ferry Tour. Josh, did it feel like to you, as much as it felt like for me, a ton more eyes were on the Korn Ferry Tour after Barstool did that production last week?
Yeah, I saw way more on social this week. Obviously, they didn't have anything to do with the production this week. So this was their first normal week again, right?
But there was more heightened care about the Korn Ferry Tour.
There was just more engagement, period. I saw a lot of it on Instagram and a ton of it on Twitter. I think the powers to be are going to see that it's a net positive what they did with Barstool.
Oh, for sure.
And it's a good thing for all those players too, because for the first time I didn't have to go look to see who won on the Korn Ferry Tour. That got to me on my timeline, and that I think is pretty cool.
Yes, for sure. So we talked about Barstool doing really good stuff with the Korn Ferry Tour last week. Another shout out to them for doing that last week as they covered that event. Over in the Senior Tour, there was no event played this week. They played the Open the following week, so I took a week off. And then finally, Live Golf. What a huge story out of Live Golf, Josh. This is one I've been excited to talk about. A guy that hasn't won on the Live Tour circuit in 2 years, right? Since its start. A guy that we've kind of not, for lack of a better term here, kind of crushed for not playing that well over on Live. Has played a little bit okay in the majors this season too. He's played well at the PGA especially. But Bryson DeChambeau fires a 58 at the Greenbrier. That's 58 with a bogey too, also, Josh. So it could have even been better. What did you make of Bryson's just amazing round at Greenbrier in that final round to get the victory after shooting a 61 in the second round to get the victory at that Live event?
An absurd round of golf played by a guy who a lot of people would call an absurd golfer. And I think this is Liv's first, in the TikTok that I made after last night, kind of reflecting on it after a couple hours. I think this is Liv's first real moment. I think this is their first organic, legit moment of something incredible happening on Live, not overhyping it, manufacturing it, anything like that. It's just good. I will say the one thing that kind of, made me chuckle, there was all of this emphasis. Like as soon as you go back and watch that last putt, the announcers go absolutely crazy for him, as they should have. The crowd is clearly just on top of their seats. And there's no mention of the team element. There's all of this focus on, Bryson DeChambeau has conquered. He has won this. It sounds like your run of the mill individual championship kind of golf. And then you go to Live Golf's website, and if you look at the individual leaderboard, it doesn't even show his total on the right side. It just shows all of his scores and his total 4 or 3 day total, but not the 58. It's just like the little things, and you have to like hunt it down, because it first sends you to the team page. Team Torque wins by 3. Great, cool. Nobody cares. Golf is still an individual sport, and this is proof of it, because this is going to be probably the biggest moment for Live Golf in 2023, and it had nothing to do with team golf at all.
Right. And two things about Bryson after that too. One about his driver, and we'll talk about sort of his comments after, where he was talking about kind of how to have that mindset to shoot 58, right? And I thought it was really interesting, Josh, because in that mindset, he was talking about play the forward tees, whether they be the red tees or whatever color they are at your local club. And as you're a junior golfer growing up, if you're a really good player, you should play those forward tees and get in the mindset of trying to break 60, which is just an incredible round, even if you're playing the forward tees, right? So I thought that was really cool because we talk so much about, these pros playing the tips, right? And tipping out the golf course, making it as hard as possible on yourself. So it's kind of cool to see a guy like Bryson sort of say, no, play it at a shorter yardage and learn how to have that mindset of, wow, I'm 6 under. Let's get it to 7. Instead of, no, I'm 4 over. Let's try to stay there at 4 over, right? So I think that's just such a cool mindset that Bryson said in that post-round interview too at the Greenbrier. So Josh, take us through. You're the gear guy. Take us through the driver switch up that Bryson went through this week.
Okay, so this past week, he had a new driver in the bag. He played the Crank Golf Formula Fire driver. And if you aren't an equipment nerd or aren't spending a lot of time on the Golf WRX forums, you might not know what this is. It's basically an up-and-comer. We'll call it like a cool kid brand, boutique-ish, I would say. He puts it in the bag, plays what he called the best golf of his last 5 years, and that was before he shot 58. Like he had felt like through the first 2 rounds of Live Greenbrier that he had played as well as he ever had. He also said that no matter where he hits it on the face of this driver, it comes back to the middle, which I'm not even exactly sure what the hell Crank is doing with this driver for that to be the case. But I was curious, right? So I've heard of the brand. I've heard of Crank Golf. Didn't expect them to have any Bryson DeChambeau caliber golfers bagging it on tour. But I check it out and I go on their website and holy cow, I am so tired of overpriced golf equipment. I am just so tired of it. $600 to $800 driver heads, $600 to $800 driver heads. This is where we are for a brand that has zero, like other than Bryson DeChambeau playing it, has no name recognition whatsoever. It's bad enough, I think, for like the casual golfer or casual golf fan that like TaylorMade drivers are selling for $650, $700 a pop. Callaway, same thing. But an entirely different thing when you have brands that just don't even have any real like credibility, charging upwards of $800 for a driver head. It's just insane. But I will say it mirrors what I've watched kind of happen with golf apparel over the last 5 years, basically since the pandemic. Robach came up and had a really good formula for how to do online sales right. And they had a good product to back it up. And they were able to charge or command the same prices as what traditional golf clothes were selling for in places like Dick's Sporting Goods and other retailers. And then after that, you had a ton of like other brands, sketchier quality all over the board, kind of come up and do the exact same thing. And now it's like you go on Amazon or you go literally anywhere online to find golf shirts, and you see the same types of golf shirts by all these boutique brands, and they're charging $60, $80, $100, $120 for a single polo. And it's like, okay, hold on. Like we are getting way in the weeds and out of control here. It's all over the board. And this driver situation is just kind of another instance of that. End rant. I know that's a lot.
No, I 100% agree with you. You scroll TikTok and you find all these, like you said, boutique brands of people selling golf shirts, and they're charging $100 for them. It's something that's really interesting to me. Golf has really boomed over the last year since the pandemic too, especially. So these brands are obviously working because more and more are popping up. But it is kind of tough because golf is, such an expensive sport. Obviously, from the start, why are we making it more expensive? But
I'm
I'll
also
with you too.
I also have like severe reservations about this Crank Golf Formula Fire driver in the first place because they're all spec'd out to basically like the different models are indicative of swing speed or based on swing speed. And they're selling drivers on there for ball speeds over 175 miles an hour, 150 miles an hour. 99.9% of people who play golf aren't generating anything close to that. And having that out there is just kind of like setting people up for failure in the worst way possible, in my mind. Because
maybe I need to swing harder, right?
Right. Well, just need to swing harder. And it also feeds that whole idea of like, you and I have been in the golf world long enough. We hear and see people say all the time, oh, I drive the ball 300 yards. Yeah, no, you don't, bud. You don't drive the ball 300 yards.
Right.
And, this just kind of feeds that whole, oh, I have this driver because I swing, my ball speed's over 175 miles an hour. Okay, sure. Right.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's not that uniform for me. I spent some time fitting some clubs when I worked back at Dick's Sporting Goods, and it's not a chart for me. It's not looking at this guy's in this ball speed with this launch angle. This is the driver for him. It's more so a feel for me, and that's something we can talk about for eons and eons, right? The whole process of golf club fitting, I don't think is uniform to everybody, but it definitely works at the end of the day. So we can get back to that eventually.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the PGA Tour schedule. We posted a full TikTok over the weekend breaking down exactly what the implications are, but I'll give you some of the quick notes here. 39 regular season events, 3 playoff events, and 8 post-playoff events to be part of the fall series. 12 designated events, including the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. Just 4 of these will feature a 36-hole cut. The Players, Genesis, and Arnold Palmer. The latter 3 will have 80 players with top 50 plus ties making it to the weekend. A few tournaments don't have sponsors yet, which is kind of a puzzling situation. AT&T backed out of sponsoring the former
Byron Nelson.
Byron Nelson. Yeah. So, but that to me makes sense because they moved up to an elevated event. So obviously they had to pony up more money, and now they're going to just be a single event sponsor rather than 2 non-elevated events.
Right.
So I would imagine the spend is about the same.
Right. Just what points out to me quick, I think I've said on this podcast before, no cut events aren't as fun for me because I'm a guy that really likes to look into kind of the weeds, especially whether it be in those DraftKings lineups or even just their storylines, right? Kind of reading where these guys come from and kind of the grind to make it through the PGA Tour and the other tours. And we're not going to see as much of that, with only 80 or 60 players in events. We're going no cut events. It's going to feel a little bit mundane, I think, Josh, as we get towards the season. I hope it doesn't feel like that. Yep. With the influence of Live coming into the PGA Tour next year. Maybe we'll get some team events too. Who knows in the future? Obviously, we know what we're getting in 2024 at this point. But kind of, I saw the writing on the wall with these limited fields events, no cut events. So it's to say it's making me sad. Yes, of course, but I kind of knew it was coming.
Yeah. What do you think the tour, if the tour is coming up with a list of things that they absolutely need to add for this upcoming season or should add within the next couple of years, what's on your list?
Match play for me. We had that every single year. We had match play, and we're getting rid of the WGC, the Dell Technologies match play. WGC's been off for a little while, but the Dell Technologies, right? We don't have that anymore, as that this year was the last year that they're going to do it for the foreseeable future. Dan Rapport at Barstool Golf had a really good idea with the Tour Championship. When you get down to 8 guys, why don't you do match play on the weekend? And I think that's a great idea too. I think we talked about some of our other ideas that we kind of came up with throughout the middle of the season. But match play is so much fun because we play it, in our local courses, whether it be a golf tournament or just out there with your buddies. Match play is the easiest one to kind of play because whether you get someone beat in a match, you might have a bad hole. Well, you go to the next one. You're one down instead of losing in a stroke play match. You might lose by 4 at a hole. It doesn't matter in match play. If you make a big number, you make a big number, you go to the next one. You only lose by 1 on that hole. So I think you have to get back to the match play element on the PGA Tour. I think it's a lot of fun to watch. We get 39 events next year that are mostly going to be stroke play events, right? And then that can get a little bit too monotonous as well. So I think we got to figure out a way to get match play back on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure with no cut events. I don't really understand what the pushback would have been against match play, other than just whittling the field down, and maybe people don't want to watch the 2 or 4 golfers that are left on Sunday. But again, if you're only doing it once a year, who cares? Like, what difference?
Once a year seems like the right kind of thing for match play in my mind.
For me, I think I'd like to see an all-star weekend. Obviously, every other major sport has an all-star weekend. There's no reason why golf couldn't do the same. We're seeing the tour going toward skills types of events anyway, or skills focused events.
Yeah,
so
with TGL
I'd like
especially.
to see that. Right. And then also this could be an opportunity to kind of normalize team events over a period of time with an all-star event every summer, or, whenever it might be held. But I think
like the other sports do a draft where the two best vote getters pick players, and that's even fun to watch because they televise it and they talk about, the storylines of guys being friends or enemies. Imagine back 5 years ago, Brooks drafts Bryson on his team. Now it doesn't really matter as much, but when they had their beef here a couple of years ago, how much fun that would be and how much, ratings it would do well on TV too. So I like that idea too, Josh.
Yeah. And I mean, look, an all-star weekend would be a phenomenal opportunity if we are going to have a unified PGA Tour, DP World Tour, and Live Golf. It'd be a magnificent opportunity to have a PGA Tour versus Live Golf match of some kind, whether it be a Ryder Cup or otherwise. You could batch that right into an awesome all-star weekend. I think it would be cool.
Great. Yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah. All right. Hey, that is going to do it for this edition of Out of Bounds. Watch for our full betting lineups on TikTok and YouTube before the St. Jude this week. Subscribe to the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and follow us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. And of course, if you're out there playing, you know the drill, whether it's down the middle or out of bounds, keep on swinging.
You've been listening to Out of Bounds. If it's coverage, debate, or discussion of pro and local golf, we'll be talking about it. Be sure to visit the website. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time on Out of Bounds.